The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap was released in late 2004 for the Game Boy Advance to great critical acclaim. Reviews of the game averaged 90% across the board, and it received the GBA Game of the Year award from several news outlets, beating out other titles such as Fire Emblem: The Sacred Stones, Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green, WarioWare Twisted, and many more. Despite all this, it remains the second worst selling Zelda game in history. The plot of the game goes as follows. You are Link, grandson of Hyrule's blacksmith, who is tasked to deliver a sword to the mayor. Things take a twist when Zelda gets turned to stone, and Link must find the 4 elements to reforge the sacred sword, save Princess Zelda, and defeat Vati. He also finds a hat along the way. Since Vati can only be defeated by the 4 sword, the mythical sword of this game, the only people with the knowledge to fix the sword are the Minish, a race of microscopic beings that are only visible to the eyes of children. Your journey starts through Minish Woods to go through the first dungeon, Deepwood Shrine. After collecting the first element, you are sent to climb Mount Crenel to get to the next dungeon, Cave of Flames. After getting the second element, you end up in the third dungeon, Fortress of Winds, where you obtain an important item to enter the Temple of Droplets, the fourth dungeon. After collecting the third element, you end up in the next dungeon, Palace of Winds, to get the fourth and final element and go off to fuse the 4 sword. You can now make your way through Dark Hyrule Castle and vanquish Vati.
Anyways, enough for an intro, let's jump into it. I'm Quo, I've been running this game since 2013. During that time, I've broken through the top 5, made a tutorial to help new runners learn the game, co-authored a tool-assisted speedrun with Tompa, and I've found my fair share of tricks and time saves for this run. Our story starts in 2005 on the Speed Demos Archives forums, where a prominent Zelda speedrunner by the name of TSA would make the best decision of his life by deciding to make a Minish Cap speedrun before a Wind Waker run. This run was a big deal for a few reasons. First of all, it was done after only 2 months of the game being released in North America. It's worth noting that TSA actually got his hands on early copies of both the Japanese and European versions, so he had plenty of time to do a few full playthroughs. All in all, he was able to deliver a final run with a time of 2 hours and 45 minutes on the dot. Here's what the run looked like at the time. The run starts as normal, and TSA gets the ability to shrink, one of the game's main mechanics, and goes through Deepwood Shrines, the first dungeon. After getting bombs and heading back to town, he would choose to do the Cucco minigame for a few extra rupees, and then get the spin attack. TSA would then go climb Mount Crenel and include the Mushroom Grab, a mini speed tech, and then get to and beat Cave of Flames, the second dungeon. Upon getting back to the castle, TSA would fuse his sword, giving him the ability to make clones, the other major game mechanic. After a few side quests, including another Cucco minigame, he would obtain the Pegasus boots to make his way through Castor Wilds in the most impractical way possible, and eventually through Fortress of Winds, the third dungeon. After another thrilling side quest, TSA gets the flippers and makes his way to Temple of Droplets and clears it, using another nice little skip for a puzzle later in the dungeon. He also gets 2 ink phases on Octo. We'll explain that later. After fusing his sword again, he heads to the Royal Crypt to collect a kinstone to unlock Vale Falls and Cloudtops, to get to Palace of Winds, where there would be a few neat time saves. After a third and final sword fuse, TSA would make his way through Dark Hyrule Castle and eventually beat Vati. TSA knew that a game's run so soon after release wouldn't be optimized, so he planned on letting the community find tricks and vowed to come back to the game in 2006 to get a sub 230 run.
There was a bit of a lull for the rest of 2006 and 2007. TSA didn't seem to be interested in going for a sub 230 run, and although many runners picked up the game to make a segmented run, there didn't seem to be much progress. There was still work being done on the game, however. People were working hard to find new strats and glitches. In late 2007, a glitch hunter by the name of Pika9323 would upload this video to YouTube. The glitch, dubbed the Ocarina glitch, would let Pika walk above walls and avoid their collisions, not unlike the exploration glitch from Link to the Past. Unfortunately, the Ocarina glitch is frame perfect in a 60 FPS game, so missing it is quite common and costs a handful of seconds each time. In the next few months, many skips will be found by the hand of Pika, such as skipping 70% of the Temple of Droplets or getting to the Palace of Winds early. This glitch, however, would bring interest back to the game. After all, it had been 2 years since TSA's run and the task was barely past the third dungeon. Greenalink, a well-respected member of the community, would be the first to pick up the reins. He, however, would not yet attempt a full game segmented run. Instead, he focused a lot more on speedruns of individual dungeons. Greenalink brought improvements to nearly all the dungeons. Among other things, he was good at utilizing the invincibility from rolls to save time or avoid damage, and he also creatively used some items in mini-boss fights, such as the boots for the Dark Nut fights.
2008 would come along and, despite not much news as far as runs go, many tricks would be discovered and more people would show interest in Minish Cap. Some people who contributed to finding these strats include the likes of Pika, Greenalink, ZFG, Mr. Grunts, Samoth, Tompa, and many more. ZFG would also write the first public route, which many, if not all, of the later routes were based off of. By 2009, many of the big time saves we see today had been discovered, and people were eager to see another completed run. Some runners were even convinced that a sub 2 hour run was possible, however this wouldn't happen for another 5 years. Near the end of the decade, a new runner by the name of SD2 had just completed a single segment run of Mario Tennis Power Tour and started working on the Minish Cap. He would have his own segmented test route done with a final time of around 2 hours, 30 minutes, and 10 seconds. This was not recorded, however, but it showed that TSA's time had been obsoleted by all the new discoveries and it was time for a new run to arise.
SD2 would complete what would be the first single segment run in April of the following year, and knock the current record time down by over half an hour to a 2:16:21. He submitted the final product to SDA for verification, but despite being a vast improvement to the current record and all the verifiers accepting the run as a high-quality, legitimate video, SD2 was generally unimpressed with how he performed, calling his own run sloppy and vowing to improve his time significantly. So he decided to have the moderators reject his run. A man of his word, 2 months later, SD2 would complete a second recorded run with a time of 2:13:19 on June 24, 2010. A very clean run to say the least, and new strats were implemented to save more time. Many of SD2's early game improvements came from significantly better researched overworld movement, as well as a better rupee route, and no more cuckoos. He would also take up some of Greenalink strats by incorporating more than just the sword to kill enemies. SD2 would also use death warps, something intriguingly missing from TSA's run. Temple of Droplets would have the first Ocarina glitch, skipping the boss key, and then another Ocarina glitch later to skip major parts of the dungeon. SD2 also gets the elusive Zero Ink in the boss fight. With a few more Ocarina glitches, the entirety of Royal Crypt, Vale Falls, and Cloud Tops were skipped. The Dark Hyrule Castle route also got a huge revamp thanks to the Ocarina glitch, and SD2 would end his run with a clean boss fight. With the promise to never do a single segment run again until Flipper Skip was discovered, SD2 would take his leave of runs. For now, at least.
2010 was a big year for TASes. There were 2 completed runs that seemed to have come out of nowhere. The first task came in early 2010 on the Japanese video sharing site Nico Video. This run did not use the newly found Ocarina glitch and finished with a time of 2 hours, 21 minutes, and 28 seconds. Details of this run are scarce, mainly due to the language barrier and poor record keeping. Despite being a mostly glitchless run and the linear nature of this game, the task did bring about some new strats in certain fights, some that we still use to this day. Another run also suddenly appeared around the same time that SD2 was working on his 213. Vlak2294 uploaded a task to YouTube with a final time of 2:06. This run went relatively under the radar and not much information was known about the runner. This run was interesting in the sense that it opted to do its own route for the most part. After getting in contact with the author, he said that, using only the glitches and skips known at the time, he made the route without any other resources. Despite the author saying that it was bad and he only did it for fun, this run would actually prove to have an important impact. 2010 also marked the start of Tompa creating his first Minish Cap task. Tompa, well known for his frame eye and insane dedication to optimization, would start tearing the game apart, finding his own new tricks along the way.
But a lot of people started working on the Minish Cap tasks, but no one finished that one. And that bothered me, because I wanted to see a full task of the game. So I pretty much ended up doing it myself. Yeah, one of the reasons I wanted to make this task in the first place was because of the flute glitch found at Pika. And Ocarina glitch, or flute, whatever. Because that one was a big glitch for the game that skipped a lot part of the later game. And some people had done runs of it, like SD2, but there wasn't a task showing them. And I kind of felt like this needs to be shown because it's a great game, and it needs a good task, like a full task of it.
Thanks to quick work, help from the tasking community, and referencing Vlak's task from earlier, Tompa was able to finish out his run in only 10 months, with a final time of 1 hour, 48 minutes, and 9 seconds in task timing, and a little over 270,000 re-records, which, even for a movie of this length, is considered a lot. For comparison, The Yoshi's Island tasks released in the same year had around 176,000 re-records. Although the amount of re-records doesn't necessarily mean the run is better, in this case it definitely was well optimized, and the run got overwhelming feedback from everyone who watched it. It was also around this time, however, that TSA, the original record holder, had all of his Zelda runs removed from SDA, since it had turned out that many of his runs were cheated. Although his Minish Cap run wasn't confirmed to be cheated, it was still removed on principle.
Minish Cap would debut in Summer Games Done Quick 2011. This run was an important part of GDQ history, as it gave birth to the Rain Rule, named after the runner of Minish Cap that year. The Rain Rule states, practice your entire game, because the final stage, dungeon, or area is just as important as the others. In short, the runner didn't know the route for the final dungeon, so with the help of one reset and 2 game overs, the entire dungeon took just over an hour to complete, leading to a final time of 3:21:27. In comparison, the record at the time took less than 20 minutes for the entire dungeon. Minish Cap would start picking up again in 2012. With Speedruns Live being introduced a little over a year earlier, it was bound to happen that people would start racing it. SD2 was an avid racer, and although he focused on many other games besides TMC, he would still wipe the boards whenever he raced. He only ever lost one race. On a fateful November day in 2012, he would race for the very first time a runner from the Netherlands by the name of MB Rules. MB Rules only started a couple of months earlier. He started out with the first PB of 2:42, but less than 2 months later he held the record. Unfortunately, due to poor documentation, there is no video and the final time is unknown. MB was seriously putting effort into the game, and he would start improving at unmatched speeds. Summer would pass and MB kept showing domination in both races and runs. He would be the first person ever to get the fire element with a sub 40-minute time, a time other runners couldn't even dream of. November came around, and at this point in time, SD2 was undefeated in races. MB's results weren't anything to laugh at either. By the time autumn rolled around, he was consistently placing high in every race. SD2 and MB would meet head-to-head in a race featuring Zalo Ray, the man who made the first tutorial. Not only would MB best SD2 in this race, he also managed to get a new record. SD2 is ready for a retaliation and spent the next few weeks working on the game seriously once again. Not 3 weeks later, he would be able to cut MB's time by 50 seconds, finishing out with the 2:09:07 on November 22, 2012.
Done. 2:09:07. Wow. I saved time on that split. Are you kidding?
SD2's 209 had a number of improvements over his old 213. First of all, save warping was introduced as the community moved away from SDA's rule set, so SD2's promise of never doing a single segment run still stands. Other than the save warps and better execution, there were a lot of new strats brought to make some problematic fights more consistent, such as the spiny choo-choo fight in Cave of Flames. A new, more complex ocarina glitch was discovered that led to a sequence break during the book quest and saved a bunch of time. There was also a completely revamped Dark Hyrule Castle route thanks to new ocarina glitches and save warps, allowing SD2 to get a different set of keys to get the big key. He also got a 1-ink octo. After this run, SD2 disappeared and was never heard from again. With his final 209, SD2 would bow out from Minish Cap.
Despite the community losing a prominent runner, TMC actually started picking up steam. MB would steal the record, in another race nonetheless, with a 2:08:15 right at the end of December. Although there weren't many route improvements in the short time from SD2's run, MB did get a lucky kinstone drop which let him save around 30 seconds, as well as the elusive 0-ink octo, solidifying his time. There's one fact that we've glazed over to this point. The year was 2013, and just to compare, the Ocarina of Time community had generally switched over to the Japanese version about 2 years prior. However, every single record run up to this point had been played on the North American version. Why? Well, in TSA's case, seeing as he had all 3 versions, it was either up to preference, or he didn't bother timing the text. Do keep in mind, in 2005, people didn't generally bother timing things like text, and SDA prioritized the high quality gameplay over trivial time saves, so TSA gets a buy on this one. SD2 actually had ordered a Japanese cartridge and got it sometime in December of 2012, but then he suddenly stopped playing. MB is a different case. Seeing as he was playing on Emulator at the time, he could easily choose whichever version he wanted. So why? Many runners would start switching over to Japanese, but MB stuck to his guns. I didn't have a good reason to not switch earlier, to be honest. Everybody played on English at the time, and I didn't really care about switching myself, so I just continued doing runs on English until I had to switch.
Before we continue, let's talk a little bit about a few aspects that could use a little explaining. Minish Cap does have a lot of randomness to it, especially in enemy movements and patterns. However, most of it is reactable, so runners generally don't lose a lot of time to that. The 3 Vadi fights, although difficult, are good examples of reactable RNG. However, the boss of Temple of Droplets, Big Octo, has a possibility of doing an attack that blacks out the screen with ink in which you cannot damage him, which wastes around 30 seconds. Octo can realistically do this attack up to 2 times in a run, meaning there's a possibility of up to a minute of time loss that's completely unavoidable. Big Octo is generally seen as a runner's least favorite boss to fight. Runners will generally keep in mind their number of ink cycles as well as their final time to accurately represent their runs.
Yes! Fucking yes, 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 fuck, yes, 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 yes!
On August 8, 2013, MB would be able to lower his time once again by over 2 minutes to a 2:05:42.
Okay. Nice. I'm extremely happy with this time. Holy fuck. Yes, dude, finally. It's been 7 months. Holy shit. Oh my god.
This run had a decent start time, but the end game is where MB was really able to shine. With improved fights and execution, as well as only missing 3 ocarina glitches in the entire run, MB was able to pull ahead at the end, despite a 2 ink Octo and a rather poor Vadi 3. While that was going on, more and more people were stopping races to the first element in favor of doing full game runs and races, and the leaderboard was starting to get populated. When MB got his 205, the closest contender was the now retired SD2 with his old 209. With the new runners, however, one of them would start dedicating himself to the game. He would spend time finding new strats, comparing himself to the record run, practicing each segment until it was perfect and pouring hours into the runs and races of the game. By the time September rolled around, Atroz would hold a 207.12, with no intention of slowing down. MB was still improving though, and motivation seemed to come back with someone hot on his tail. 2 days after Atroz got a new PB of 206 and was trying to close the gap, MB would set another record of 205.06. Not a huge improvement, however, he had a bad 50-second time loss in the 5th dungeon, but he did get the elusive 0 ink. Atroz kept up the hard work, and in early December, he would have a finished run of 205.30, only 24 seconds behind the record, which was the closest anyone had gotten all that year. MB, only 4 days later, would lower his time down to a 204.16, seemingly safe from Atroz's grasp.
Got him. Alright. Well, I guess I'm going for Sub 204 next time.
He just seemed to push it further and further away. And so he seemed to be able to, whenever he wanted to, just hop on the game and get a world record like it was nothing. Just improve his time like it was absolutely nothing. So he was just one of those people that every time I saw him play the game, I was like, man, he's just so much better at this game than I am. He was the person to beat at the time. I never ever considered myself to be better than him, even when I had the world record.
However, Atroz kept pushing, and on December 12th, 3 days after MB's new record, he would hold the record for the first time with a final time of 203.30. Unfortunately, this VOD no longer exists.
Anyways, MB would be back, and on December 21st, he would set a time of 2:02:59.
Oh my god, I still got it. Yes! Yes! Dude, oh my god, yes. That was so fucking close.
And 2013 would come to a close. For a year without any big discoveries, dropping the record by almost 6 minutes was an amazing feat. Atroz wasn't close to done yet. After more practice, research, and strat finding, he was able to push the time down a little further on the 12th of January with a run of 2:02:11.
World fucking record. There we go. Yes!
I would just load up an area that I felt like I just didn't like how it went. Like I felt like it was kind of clunky and it could be more streamlined. So I'd just load up an area and just kind of do random things. my favorite thing to do in any video game for a speedrun is just load up boss fights and just fight the boss thousands of times over again.
Atroz really had the run of his life, especially in the early game, where he would beat out MB's best fire element split by 1 second and his own best boot split by almost 30 seconds. A 0 Incocto, a clean Palace of Winds, and a decent body fight were able to nail him the record. Atroz would be the first of the good runners to officially make the switch to Japanese and go after the long sought after sub 2 hour time. Atroz, trying to keep the playing field balanced, wanted to compare himself to what the best player at the time was using, so he only made the switch to Japanese once he felt he established himself as a top runner. He was actually able to best his own time, however, he felt that until the Japanese version became standardized, he would not submit his times to the leaderboards. MB at the time had taken an extended break. He wasn't one to gain motivation for the game easily, and despite losing his record, he wasn't ready to jump back into it. Eventually, the time came and his break would end. On his second run back, MB would finish a run in April, beating Atroz's best time on the leaderboards with a 2:01:30.
Yes! Oh my fucking hell. Oh my fucking... Yes!
MB's 2:01 was definitely a good run. On a side-by-side comparison, Atroz had a better early game, but MB would catch up in Temple of Droplets and Palace of Winds. They were actually tied when beating the 5th dungeon, and MB barely ahead entering the final boss. However, with a better body fight, MB would pull ahead by over 40 seconds. With that run coming to an end, he mentioned that he'd never thought he would ever get a time this low, and suddenly was motivated to go for the sub 2:01 on English, which would eventually come in May. MB even said it himself, his early game wasn't that great in his 2:01, so he had to make sure to save a lot of time in this run, which he did, and was over a minute ahead entering Temple of Droplets. A 1 Ink Octo lost him a bit of time, but he recovered more than his fair share in Palace of Winds. Unfortunately, a few big mistakes cost MB the sub 2, but a new record by nearly a minute is nothing to be sad about. Atroz, at this point in time, was starting to burn out. He had been playing Minish Cap for what felt like every day for months now, and just seemed to need a break. Sub 2 was within reach of the both of them, but with Atroz burnt out and MB wanting to focus a bit more on 100%, there would be yet another lull for TMC records. But that didn't last very long.
Atroz and MB's downfall would be the fact that they were both still using the North American version of the game, where a lot of other people had already switched over, giving some players who may not normally have been a contender a chance. And that chance came to a Link to the Past runner by the name of Chaos Knight 373. CK, who had done one run and seemingly quit in October 2013, had picked up the game again in February 2014, and started seeing consistent improvement over the next few months. CK definitely showed a love for the game, remaking a complete tutorial, making in-depth guides on mechanics, and finding new strats in the run. Chaos Knight was able to beat MB's time using the Japanese version on June 27th.
No freaking way! No way! Oh my god, no way! Oh my god, no effing way, man! Oh my god! Oh, I sniped him so bad.
Technically speaking, the execution of this run wasn't as good since the Japanese version does save well over 2 minutes. CK had a good early game, especially in Cave of Flames, and despite a 1 Ink Octo, his Palace of Winds would help him pull ahead from his PB and solidify his time. On the final hit, he pushed ahead of MB by 9 seconds. Now, I'm definitely not trying to talk down CK's time. His run was exceptional, and the time he got was a feat in itself, but it still left a bad taste in some people's mouth that a Japanese run only beat the record purely because of text differences. CK even admitted that himself, that his run wasn't the best, only the fastest.
I agree with him, and that's what made it even worse, is I agreed with his point of view, and I even told him I was in the wrong for not switching to the Japanese version. It's just, I fought to get towards MB's time for so long that I didn't want to beat him by using the faster version. So when I got the 2:03:30, it was on English, the English version, because that's what MB was using. It was me being stubborn, that's all it was. I just don't like the idea of beating somebody who I think is better than me just because I used a version of the game that's faster, even though the whole point of speedrunning is to use like the faster version and try to shave off as many seconds as possible. It was just me being stubborn.
4 days later, MB would bust out of the woodworks and infamously switch to the Japanese version to get the prolific sub-2 hour time. On July 1st, 2014, MB would finish a run in 1:59.49.
It has been done. Oh my fucking god, that fucking clutch in the end, dude. Finally getting that sub 2. Jesus.
The time that's been sought after since before SD2's era had finally been achieved. MB would call this run shitty, blaming the bulk of what happened on stupid mistakes, but he still had more than enough skill to easily cut the 2 hour mark using the Japanese version. Unfortunately, trouble was brewing behind the scene. The TMC community had done some testing and realized that the emulator does in fact save significantly more time than they originally thought. It was a hard decision, but the moderation team came to the decision to unlist all of the emulator runs on the leaderboard. This, obviously, had a few side effects. First of all, there were some members of the community that felt strongly about the decision to the point that they dropped the game and left the community. Most notably, Chaos Knight, who ended up taking an extended break from streaming altogether because of it. The other big side effect is that, since MB, Atroz, and CK all ran on emulator, none of their record runs were technically valid anymore. So congratulations to Windmask, you technically have the record with the 208.41.
Yeah, split. Thanks, Atroz. That was a really terrible third cycle, though. As far as the other runners go, there were two trains of thoughts. Some people didn't mind the emulator ban and would keep running on emulator regardless, and some people would spend the money to get a Game Boy player and Japanese TMC cartridge. Both MB and Atroz would switch to console, so who would be the first one to get the record back? Introducing ToadsWoot. At the time of the emulator ban, he was a top 5 runner. There was definitely a power gap between Toads and the top 3, but he still had his merits. Toads had intended to run on console for a while now, so even before the emulator debate was happening, he already had a Japanese cartridge on the way. He was able to get an easy record with a 2:03:02.
Whatever. Barely not sub 203.
2 days later, he would lower it to a 2:01:25.
Ugh. Whatever. At least it's 201. That's still something. Oh my god, I hate this fight so much.
Toads would later describe this period of time as having fun with the game, whatever that means, so he was happy to put the time into runs. They say idle hands are the devil's playthings. MB, with a Japanese cartridge of his own on the way, couldn't do much other than practice, so he turned to glitch hunting. He was testing some of the older glitches out to see if anything new could come of them, when he would investigate the portal items glitch found by Mr. Gruns back in 2008.
Sure, in Fortress of Winds, the third dungeon, MB rules back then found the boss key skip, which is done by using a glitch called portal items. Basically you just use the moments on the portal, which pushes you back a little bit, and then if you jump off the portal, you are a little bit inside the wall, but you don't quite make it up there. But with the help of a bomb boost, you get pushed up the wall so that you can walk on the wall and skip the boss key that way.
MB found that this European-only glitch that was seemingly useless could be combined with the well-timed bomb explosion to push Link just a tiny bit further, which would eventually lead to the Fortress of Winds big key skip. A skip that saves over 3 minutes on a version that loses about 2 minutes to text. MB was pretty excited for this, being a big advocate of the European version. Unfortunately, about 6 hours later, he learned that the trick is, in fact, possible on the Japanese version. With a new skip found, an important question was asked to Tompa. New task when? Although Tompa originally had no intentions of focusing on TMC again, he would convince me to start the project myself, which he would later join in on. This was the start of a 2-year journey of creating a new task for the Minish Cap. Anyways, Toads was able to get himself a time of 2 hours and 23 seconds with the new skip, a run that was, in a word, bad. The next day, 1:59:35. In 2 words, pretty bad. Toads would keep pushing, but he gave himself a personal goal of a 1:56 as a final time. The next day, 1:58:05. 2 days later, 1:56:54. Toads was on a rampage with a new goal of 1:55. The very next day, 1 hour, 56 minutes, and 17 seconds. This time, however, it was set by MB, who had recently got his Japanese cartridge in the mail. Toads was good, yes, but not unstoppable. Yet anyways. Unfortunately for Toads, he would lose internet for over a month during September and October and wouldn't be able to stream. MB, without the competition, would stop any percent runs in order to focus on 100%. AGDQ 2015 had accepted Minish Cap into the marathon to be run by Chaos Knight. However, he had left the community with no serious intention of coming back. The backup runner was someone who didn't have nearly as much experience in the game, so Atroz would force himself out of hiding to buckle down and practice. The backup runner ended up dropping out for Atroz to take the stage and represent the game. The quality of the run and commentary was great, however, there were a few major mistakes which made Atroz not too happy with the run. It was, however, still an objectively fine run. If Atroz wasn't done with the game back in January, he for sure was after AGDQ. He would quit TMC for good, and, for quite a long time, disappeared from Twitch altogether.
Wow. Holy crap, that's horrible.
Toads, throughout the rest of 2014 and 2015, would keep steadily dropping the record down, only taking breaks to focus either on 100% or on 4 Swords adventures. Although no big discoveries were found, there was starting to be more and more consistently fast route changes and strats implemented into the run. The most noteworthy of strats include an RNG manipulation for the triple Darknet fight. On September 27, 2015, Toads would achieve a run with a final time of 1 hour, 52 minutes, and 52 seconds, the first run that he would feel satisfied with.
It's still a 52, but that was bullshit. I call bullshit on that. What the fuck? I still got a 52. I am... oh my god, I'm happy with that.
No one was all that close to Toads, and the game seemed to slow down a little bit. The task was still in the works, but nowhere near done. Months would pass when a new runner to the game, Blue Infinity 22, would propose to host a Minish Cap tournament for the summer of 2016. This would spark interest in many runners, old and new alike. This would bring a lot of old runners out of retirement, including Toads, MB, Kitty, Wilzo, Quo, PPL Toast, Windmask, and Isual, all people who, at one point or another, were top 5 runners. The tournament attracted a total of 26 entrants, which was a bit of a surprise, as at the time there were very few active runners. Everyone seemed excited, people started practicing and streaming again, and predictions were made. Many people thought Toads would end up on top, while a select few voted for MB, and one lonely lad voted for Isual. The only constant was that across the boards, Quo was seeded 3rd to win for some odd reason. Right before the start of the tournament, Tompa, still working hard on the task, found a new glitch in the 5th dungeon. By playing the ocarina frame perfectly as an enemy dies and a cutscene starts, you would activate the ocarina glitch. This trick would cost very little time to go for, however, due to the fact that there was no consistent setup and you only have one shot at the frame perfect glitch, an RTA setup was near impossible. As the tournament started, there was a lot of excitement for it. With so many high-level runners back and practicing, no one seemed to be safe. If you didn't practice, you were gone round 2. Isual. There were upsets, PBs left and right, races that came down to the wire, and a few daredevils who would go for the new ocarina glitch in Palace of Winds. However, in the end, the tournament was unbalanced. Only 3 people finished some races with a time of 1:57, which would be Quo, Kitty, and Wilzo. Toads and MB, however, would not have a single time worse than 1:56. They would both tear through the bracket and meet in finals. Before we get there though, round 3 set up MB, seed 2, versus Wilzo, seed 7. MB was on a decent run, about a minute ahead of his old 1:56 from 2 years prior, entering the Temple of Droplets. Through good luck and execution, he managed to get a 0 ink octo and was suddenly 2 minutes ahead. With the help of Palace of Winds' ocarina glitch, he was over 3 minutes ahead. He would end up being over 3.5 minutes ahead entering the final boss, which, for a time that was less than 3.5 minutes behind the record, was amazing to say the least. Unfortunately, due to the bad Darknut fight in Avadi 3, he would end up losing his pace. There wasn't a doubt in anyone's mind that MB was, after all these years, still a god at this game. The finals were, unsurprisingly, Toads vs MB. The race was incredibly neck and neck until MB was able to pull ahead after Octo thanks to an ink phase, and kept that lead until a rather sour mistake in the last dungeon. On getting the big key, they were within frames of each other. However, MB would miss an important manipulation, and Toads would be able to seal the lead and ride it until the end of the game, sending MB to loser's bracket. MB would race Kitty, the 5th seed runner who was having a nice time dominating the loser's bracket, but MB would seal his fate and climb back up to meet Toads in grand finals. With a mix of Toads playing really well and MB having a few sloppy mistakes, by the end of the second dungeon, Toads would have an impressive 45-second lead. MB was not able to catch back up. Toads won, cementing himself as the best player in the world once again.
Ooh, what I remember most about it was that Blue did it, and it was actually quite well done. It was his first tournament that he ever made, or organized rather, and it was very well organized. People had a lot of time for it to prepare. We had a lot of new runners coming in because of it, and the tournament itself was just really fun. We had Fiesel for the restream. We had a lot of commentators. Everyone was really enthusiastic and did a lot of research on the run about the lore, about the tricks, and everything just worked out really well. It was a lot of fun.
As the tournament came to a close, Tompa and I finished the task, and with the help of Toads' commentary, released it to the public. This ended the 2-year-long journey with a time we were both happy with, and a whopping 578,989 re-records. For comparison, the most recent Super Mario Sunshine task had 116,660 re-records. The new task also brought about a number of new improvements that RTA runners would integrate into their runs, such as more optimized boots usage and a few new different strats for some rooms and fights. Minish Cap would be submitted and accepted into a Games Done Quick for a 3rd time by the hands of DBX, who was notoriously missing from the tournament. DBX was better known for his proficiency in many other games. He had held the record in Super Castlevania 4 for the SNES and Cave Story for PC, and also had top times in other games such as Super Metroid and Ori and the Blind Forest. DBX had only recently picked up Minish Cap at the end of 2015, and, within 2 months, would be less than 5 minutes behind Toads before promptly taking a break from the game. Despite not entering it, he would be brought back to the game by the tournament, and he would start seriously working on lowering his time. By the time November rolled around, the record would be beaten. By Toads though, he still played the game sometimes, and finally beat out his 1.5-year-old record.
The biggest contributor to the run was the Zero Ink Octo. However, this was also the first record run to use the new strats brought about by the tasks. Most notably, a mechanic called bow cancelling, a few new route changes such as where to get water for the book quest, and a much more optimized Palace of Winds. He did, however, miss the cutscene ocarina glitch. However, DBX wasn't too far behind and wanted that gap closed before AGDQ hit. He had a goal of 151. By the end of December, he was less than 10 seconds behind Toads. On January 2nd, 2017, he was able to smash the record by over 40 seconds, right in time for AGDQ. After running the game for only a year, he managed to pull off a record run, which is not something you see very often anymore. DBX's record run has a fairly mediocre start, but he was able to get a very nice Temple of Droplets split thanks to a Zero Ink Octo, and he was able to keep that lead until the end of the game. With a mix of good luck on the bosses, skill, and no major mistakes, DBX would finish with a final time of 151.38. At AGDQ, DBX was able to deliver a phenomenal run in 154 with great commentary, a run that even DBX himself would describe as much better than he expected. In the past 2 years, there have been many advancements in Minish Cap, not only in the sense of big glitches, but also RNG manipulations and small time saves. Out of all the GDQ runs, this one was by far the best received.
It was only a week or so later, on January 19th, that Toads had a run that was, as the kids say, nothing special. It was actually his first stream back in a while, so the rest was expected, yet he had a decent enough pace entering the final boss. Somehow, Toads managed to beat Vati2 in 3 cycles, something that baffled all the runners of the game, and thanks to that 30-second time save, he would snag the record back from DBX with a time of 151.17.
I thought I missed. Ah! Whoa!
Fire Turtle, another prominent runner, would be the one to find how to reproduce the 3-cycle fight, and PPL Toast would find a consistent way to beat the boss this way. Suddenly, everyone had a free 30-second time save. DBX would go into hiding, mostly due to Breath of the Wild coming out, and Toads would go back to 100%, leaving any percent alone for a little while longer.
It wouldn't be until late April that Toads would pick up any percent again, and by the time May 9th rolled around, he had dropped the record by 4 minutes and 20 seconds.
Nice. 146. The salty run back was a success. Yay!
Toads had found, in late April, a way to skip a significant portion of Palace of Winds by trying to light a door on fire. And Yadra, a Four Swords adventure tasser and runner, helped craft what would end up being the fabled flipper skip, something sought after since the days of SDA. With both tricks combined, saving well over 4 minutes, 2017 was looking good as far as Minish Cap was concerned. Coupled with flipper skip was another big skip that, thanks to flipper skip, was something possible in the game. By using cutscene ocarina glitch found by Tompa in 2016, you can use the same trick in a different section of Palace of Winds to get the ocarina glitch. This allows runners to travel across the dungeon to find a later key that we now skip with boss door clipping, and open a door that normally requires a key that needs the power bracelets to obtain. This would skip the power bracelets and save an additional 2 minutes in the run. However, attempting it in runs is extremely brutal, since missing it loses about 1.5 minutes, making it redundant if you get the setupless frame-perfect trick on your second try.
Around this time, Tompa also managed to prove that TSA's Minish Cap run from 2005 was in fact spliced. Another thing checked off the to-do list. This begs the question as to why did he splice a run with 2 ink even though he noted that it lost 1 minute, but that question remains unanswered.
Anyways, with the new skips, many runners were able to get easy PBs, and Toads lowered the record to a 146.29 in July.
Didn't screw up blue balls. That was really close though, twice. Second blue ball and third when I almost screwed up.
With a few new improvements and a switch to the Wii U Virtual Console, which saves roughly 25 seconds, Toads was able to lower the record yet again in January 2018 to a 145.56.
That's kind of funny.
The run was incredibly different now that flipper skip and boss door clipping were integrated into it. Not only does Toads now skip large parts of Temple of Droplets and Palace of Winds, but many new manipulations were introduced into the run, including the blue rupee manip at the beginning and a green kinstone manipulation to be able to get the magic boomerang that is required for the boss door clip.
Then Toads come around and uses the stupid lamp, and then eventually the boomerang to find a way to skip them. It's like, I never get the boomerang, that's a useless item, I don't test that crap, and the lantern is also crap, so I never end up testing those things to skip the boomerang because it makes no sense to me. But that's the thing when speedrunning and tasking, like you have to try these weird things that don't make sense, but they may end up doing something useful.
Toads, now once again satisfied, would take another break from any percent. Sometime early in 2018, a new poll was made, this time to unban emulators. Seeing as how they've been made more accurate across the years, and with the new Wii U version being released, emulator runs weren't seen nearly as poorly. There were still quite a few people who had been playing on emulator to the point where when it was allowed, 4 out of the top 10 runs were on emulator. This also invalidated Windmask's run as a world record. Sorry, Windmask.
The ban back then was justified because emulators back then were a lot more inaccurate, and therefore there were a lot of time saves just strictly for emulator. Nowadays that we can run on Wii U, which have the same, or not the same, but similar time saves, we decided that emulator rules are also outdated since we do allow Wii U, and we should just unban them, which we did.
This opened the doors for the emulator runners to be able to grasp the record, and the first to do it would be Darky Squid. Darky Squid was an interesting case. He popped up seemingly out of nowhere one day with a time of 1:58 as his first run in June 2017, and it would take him less than 3 months to break into the top 3. On August 18th, 2018, Squid would be able to beat Toads by a hair, finishing with a time of 1:45.50. Squid's run brings about many new strats that had been found in recent months to optimize the run more. Squid is the type of player to not shy away from the harder strats, even if they only save a second or two. This definitely paid off, and with the help of a Zero Ink Octo and a better Darknut manipulation, he would be able to pull ahead of Toads, if only for a short time. About 14 hours later, Toads would have completed an offline attempt of his own and restreamed it later that day. The difference, however, is that Toads would be the first to attempt and complete a run with Bracelet Skip. With the pressure on, Toads admitted that the ending was a little more sloppy than he'd hoped, but any finished run with Bracelet Skip is considered a victory. With a final time of 1 hour 44 minutes and 19 seconds, Toads buried Squid's dream and retook his claim to the throne.
And I did it! 20, please. It was actually a 144.19 on my other splits, so I'm not sure which one is more accurate. I'll probably have to time it. Since it was actually only supposed to be a warm-up run to get back into Minish Cap again, I went for Bracelet Skip, which is usually not something you do for RTA. Bracelet Skip is in Palace of Winds, you can get a cutscene ocarina glitch, which is a 1-frame trick and you only get one chance at it. If you miss it, you lose 1.5 minutes. I went for it and I did get it first try, so I saved 1 minute 50 seconds, something around that. So actually quite a lot of time. And I also got the other cutscene ocarina glitch in Palace of Winds, which saves another about 40 seconds, or 35, something like that. So it was a really good Palace of Winds overall, which ended up saving a lot of time compared to my PB. And the rest of the run was also just pretty good overall, especially the Vadi fights, which then ended up PBing by quite a bit.
Today, that is where the record stands. Minish Cap is one of the least explored Zelda games, keeping up with its theme of being underrated. However, it was still able to grow a great community who both love and hate the game to death, and aren't afraid of taking themselves too seriously. Minish Cap has evolved and continues to do so, and no matter if it hits a lull in runners, it always bounces back. There are still theories on how to save time and skip major parts of the game, so the story of the Minish Cap is far from over.